Hi everyone, I'm Miss Bailey and I'm with the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Los Angeles, and you're in our virtual STEM laboratory. Welcome. Today we are going to be continuing on this week's theme of plants, and this week's theme of plants is really special to me. I love plants. I even have some gardening stuff at my own home. And today we are going to be doing a plant dissection. So what you'll need for your dissection today is your specimen, of course, some plants. I bought these at the market, but you can even take a stroll around your neighborhood, maybe with your family, and you can pick off some flowers as you go along, or you can get them for pretty inexpensively at the market as well. You also just need one flower to do this experiment. You will also need a knife or a pair of scissors. If you have that, please be very, very careful. The knife doesn't have to be that large. This one is perfectly fine. Please make sure you ask your parent or your guardian when you're using the knife. And a cutting board like I'm using today is really nice, or you can just use a paper plate too. So we're gonna get right on into our dissection today. I'm gonna be going through the different parts of the plant, but if you need to pause the video at any point so you can catch up or so you can follow along, maybe get a closer look, that's totally fine. So we are going to start off with the external anatomy. And external anatomy means the outside or the outside plant parts. And you're probably wondering, Miss Bailey, like what parts of a plant are outside and what part of a plant is inside? We'll get into that. So looking at this plant or looking at this flower and imagining that it's still in the soil, still growing, let's start from the bottom. On the very, very bottom of the plant are those roots, right? There are these little tubes that come out of the bottom, and sometimes they even have these hair-like structures on them. Now take a second and think about what you think the point, or what do you think the roots do for the plant? Well, the roots are what absorbs all the nutrients from the soil. So any minerals, any vitamins, any organic materials that the soil has and that the plant needs, it's going to absorb through those roots, and the water too. Plants all need water. It's going to absorb through the roots, and then it's going to travel up the plant, and it's going to travel up the stem, which is this woody part right here. And the stem is full of these different highways almost, or like blood vessels that we have in our body, these different pathways essentially for different nutrients and water and sugar to move. And plants make sugar through a process called photosynthesis. You may have heard that before. And where plants do the most photosynthesis is actually on the leaves, like this part here. So when you have your plant, hopefully you can get a leaf or two. And I encourage you to take a good look at your leaf like I am right now. Look at its top side, look at its bottom side, and actually take a good feel on it too. I'm feeling my leaf right now, and the top feels really smooth and slick. And the bottom part feels really ridgy, or I feel the ridges on top of the leaf. You can also do a bonus experiment too, even. If you take off this leaf and put it in some water, leave it in a sunny spot for a few hours, and something may or may not happen. The 4th and 5th graders may know what that something is. So we are going to take the leaves off of our flower. And if you have a bunch of flowers like I do here today, I would look at the flowers and try to pick which one you like the most. Hopefully it has the most intact petals, or maybe it has the most intact little stringy bits that we'll find out what they are called in a little bit. So I'm gonna look and pick the flower that looks the best to me, has the strongest looking petals, looks most intact. I'm gonna cut so that's separated. So we have one little bud like this. Okay, so we have a leaf. We've already talked about what they do. They do the photosynthesis for the plant. They create sugar through sunlight and water, which is really fun. And we are gonna pull this guy off. And we're gonna start with the first major part of the external anatomy, or the first part into the internal anatomy rather, which is the sepals. And the sepals are these petals almost. It depends on some flowers. Sometimes they're green, sometimes they look like petals like on this plant. They are the petals in this case that connect to the outside of the plant. So if you look at my flower here, you'll see that there are petals that connect directly to the outside. Sweet. There are petals, here we go, that connect directly to the outside here. So we are going to pull these off right here. Mm-hmm. All right, so these were all called sepals, and these sepals are actually used to protect the flower when it's growing. So when flowers first grow, there are these very delicate, very tiny little buds, and these sepals are like an outside covering that will protect eventually the blooming flower. Okay, so now we're gonna go start getting into the internal anatomy. And for the flower anatomy, we're essentially looking at the reproductive system, and we're going to be looking at both the male and the female reproductive parts. In this case, this flower has both male and female reproductive organs and parts, but some plants, especially those that are native to Southern California, they have a specific boy flower and a specific girl flower, which is really interesting. But the vast majority of flowers have both male and female reproductive parts in one flower. And we call that monoecious or monoecious in science. There's always a really fun scientific word for nearly everything. So we are going to first remove the petals, and you're probably really familiar with the petals. Now these petals are really pretty. These ones I have are like polka dotted and pink. They're very, very cool to look at. And they should be. Flowers come in all kinds of different colors and varieties. And that's for good reason. Flowers want to attract pollinators. You may have heard that word before, pollinators. Now these are all kinds of different things that can bring pollen, the life force, if you will, of a plant, from one flower to another. Some flowers need to be pollinated by other flowers, and some flowers can actually be pollinated by themselves, which is really interesting. It depends on the species of flower and the species of plant, though. So some pollinators that you may be familiar with are bees, which is why bees are so important. They help pollinate all kinds of different flowers and fruits, especially that we grow here in America and all around the world. There's also all kinds of different insects like butterflies, hummingbirds, even wind is considered a pollinator because the wind can carry pollen, these microscopic little bits, across vast distances and to carry it to another flower. So we are going to be taking a look at the stamen and anther, or the male reproductive organ. And that's these little antenna bits almost, these little bits on the flower. So we're going to remove each one of these little stamen and anther parts. I'm going to move my petals out of the way. I'm going to put these down right here. So we're going to remove them. And as we remove them, I'm going to count to see how many I have. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Very cool. So we're going to look at one up close. And so this is the stamen and anther. This is altogether the male reproductive part of the flower. So this long stylus part is called the stamen. And this little fuzzy bit at the top is called the anther. And the anther is where we actually have pollen being created. And that's where the pollen is made. And the anther, or the stamen, is where the pollen is being held. So flowers like to have their stamen and anthers like really, really tall, and they like to have their pollen up really, really high in their flowers, so their pollen can travel a lot easier. Remember, flowers want to reproduce and make more flowers. So now we're going to look at the female reproductive part. Now this is called the pistil. This whole thing left that I have in my hand is called the pistil. We have the stigma, which is this bit right here that I'm pointing to, this little like arrow, and I like to call it the sticky stigma because pollen actually sticks to this part here, and then pollen will travel down this style, which is what this is. The stem is called the style, and then it'll travel way down to this green part here, and that's the ovary actually of the plant, and that's where we're going to do our one cut. So we are going to cut safely on the cutting board. And we're just going to be cutting right down the middle, like where I'm pointing my knife right now. Please be very careful. And we're going to make one clean cut. Okay. Now, I want you to look at both parts, and I want you to see all the little patterns that are inside the plant, depending on what kind of flower or what kind of plant you're looking at. You can have more little segments than I have. And if you squeeze it, you'll see these little things that look like seeds that pop out. Maybe not on this side. Definitely get it on the other side. You'll see these little seeds that pop out, and those are the ovules. And that's where a fruit would be. Now, all the fruits that you eat, like tomatoes, strawberries, oranges, limes, all fruit come from flowers, which is wild. They all start off as flowers, and then the flowers end up looking like they're dying, and then the base gets really, really big, and it becomes a fruit. All right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's dissection. Today was a really great way to practice our dissection skills. You were able to practice your knife skills very safely, hopefully. I hope you enjoyed this week's plant-themed activities, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.